Hello, everybody. This is an exciting day for us at Four Pines Quilting. We're ready to announce our new Prairie Meadow sew-along. You will come in the store and you will see this beautiful kit, and it is beautiful. It contains all sorts of new things for us, including prefused pieces. Well, let's take a look inside and see what's in here. Ooh, here it is. The first thing we have is a beautiful binder just for Prairie Meadow. And inside that binder, you will see Lori Holt's Prairie Meadow Sew-Along Guide. We will be supplementing this guide along the way, but there's important information in here. And you will see us continually to refer to pages in this guide when we're instructing you along the way. By the way, I think there'll be a private Facebook group for all of those who join us in Prairie Meadow. That's where you'll find your files. That's where you'll find your instructions. That's where you can show off all the goodies you've created. And that's where you can share anything with anybody else doing this project with us. Good place to ask questions and get answers as well. Best place to ask questions and answers. Let's take a peek at some of the stuff that she tells us. She gives us her itinerary. We're going to be about a couple weeks behind her, but hey, that's okay. We're worth waiting for. All the fabric requirements. It identifies all the fabric for you. The most important thing, I'm going to scroll by all these beautiful pictures, all the shapes that you will also have all these in your box as well, in case you want to do it the Lori Holt way. The most important things I want to point out is that all seams are pressed open in this project. She does this to reduce bulk. So keep in mind, we are pressing all seams open on the border pieces as well as on the block pieces, which is what we're going to concentrate on today. Over here, she shows you a great example of what your background block pieces are going to be. And we're going to need 12 of these. So this is a good place to start your project. You'll notice that the squares in the middle, well, those are the smaller 4.5-inch squares that we will be cutting. The outside corners are your 5.5-inch squares, and you guessed it, the little rectangles that make up each end are the 4.5 by 5.5-inch rectangles. This is your put-together guide. So when you're confused about what goes where, go ahead and turn to page 13, and you'll see a beautiful example of how it's laid out. Then you'll see it sewed together down below. Again, we will be creating 12 of these, and you can do this before you even start your applique process. It's kind of faster to do it that way, to be honest with you. Get them all out of the way. I'll show you how to label them and have them ready to go. The other thing I wanted to point out is how her blocks are numbered on page 15. We are going to be using the same numbering sequence when you get your kit. So if you go, oh, what does block 1 look like? Well, by golly, here it is, labeled for you, block 1. All the way through block 12. And as we release the files and any instructions, it will be released in this exact order that you see here, and we will use the same nomenclature. So you should be able to point to the block you're looking at. And this is just a nice little Meadows notes that you can use for yourself. The most exciting part for me becomes after that. You will see that you have 12 sleeves. Every sleeve contains all the pieces you will need for each block, and they are labeled, which is a good thing because I dropped my book on the floor and they all went poof, and I said, oh my goodness, at least they're all labeled so I know which sleeve they go into. So you will see every single one here. This one is not complete, so the pages aren't full yet, but it will be when you get it. All the way through number 12. See, this is what I mean. Get back in there. All the way through number 12. The only piece that isn't sitting in their sleeve is this piece for block number 3. You'll see Lori even talk about this piece. I don't think she'll ever do the piece this big again because it didn't fit in her fancy little notebook. So she too takes her template and slides it in the back. And that's just what we've done here. Piece 3 will be in the back. Now the reason they're pretty side down isn't to say they're not pretty. It's so you can quickly identify what block they go into. So that's the exciting notebook you will get. Okay, let's pick it up with going back to these background blocks. Again, that's probably where I would start my quilt. Inside your beautiful kit, you will notice that you have a beautiful stack of these, we're going to call them whites even though, they're colors. all of these become what you're going to cut for your background blocks, okay? So the first thing I would do is take these out. I would leave everything else in here. These are all the beautiful things that you're going to be using for your borders. You should have more than enough for your borders. We also have binding fabric in here as well. Remember, all your pre-fused, ready-to-go shapes are in your notebook. You are not using these to create those. They're created for you. So let's take a look at the background pieces. These are the 12 blocks we'll be creating with the background pieces. She uses, and I'm going to bring you on her blog in a minute, but she actually uses 2 of these colors, no more than 2 of these colors in each block. And I only know that because I've cut them all out. So you can see that this background is rather scrappy. Now you can copy her verbatim if you want. You wait till she posts her block on the blog, and then you can put your pieces together just as Lori did. Or you can do what I did, and I just randomly stacked my fabric and made sure the same one wasn't used more than twice in each block, and mine came out nice and scrappy. And I'll show those to you as well. But keep in mind, she's got information here that's going to be very helpful to you. We are not replacing her. We are supplementing her. Now let's cover how I prep my fabric before I cut. I do this for every project, okay? I know you all don't, but I do. I think I get much better accurate results through the entire quilt process. But especially if you're going to do the applique. The more stabilizer you have in your fabric, the better and less puckers you're going to have, whether you're doing it by hand, by machine, with a blanket stitch, or digitized. You're going to be happy you did it. First thing I do is I spread out my fabric. And I spread it out face down. And I take my fancy dancy spritzer bottle. Mine is battery operated because I get tired of pulling the trigger. And we actually have these better ones, actually, because we've tried several different kinds since I showed mine off. Load it up with your favorite starch or starch alternative. Currently, I have Best Press in this. It is not necessary to go to Terrell Magic for this project. Best Press is more than fine. The other liquid, I can never say the name right. Niagara works really well, and they also have that in the store. And again, hey, a little vodka and water goes a long way and does a great job. And if you're thirsty, So what I do, and I do this is when I have yardage. If I just have a little piece or a little seam, I'm not taking out the trigger happy sprayer, okay? But when I'm doing yardage like this, I turn on my sprayer, or sure I was on and I turned it off. And I mist it all. Get it really nice and wet, people. I don't iron right away, and I get it wetter than this in all honesty. I don't iron it right away. I then take it and I put it on my clothes rack. All my pieces, I literally line up my clothes rack and I let them dry here or nearly dry here. The reason I don't put the iron on it right away is because what happens is you simply evaporate the product you just put on it. You need to let that product have a chance to soak into the fabric, naturally dry. Now, that doesn't take as long as you think. Literally 15 minutes, I can pick that up and iron it. The other nice thing is if it dries too long, because lots of time I'll be spritzing away, and then be watching The Bachelor, and then it's time for bed. I can pick that up in the morning, just give it another light spritz of even just water, and I haven't lost my starch product. It's still there. It irons up beautifully. So if you haven't got a clothes rack, use chairs, whatnot. But I love these portable clothes racks. I think I have 2 because you never know how many things you have to iron. But that's my tip for prepping. Okay? Now it's prepped. Okay, well, let's take a look at where we find our cutting instructions for all those backgrounds. It's on page 8 of Lori's instructions. And you'll see the little fabrics that I just had a pile of in front of you, and you'll see that it tells you what to cut out of each one of them. Now it's also cutting some rectangles that we'll use later in one of the sashings. I went ahead and cut those at the same time. So this clearly tells you what fabrics you are going to need and what you're going to cut from each one. And the easiest way to do that, I think, and she demonstrates this on her blog as well, is to cut strips and then subcut it into the sizes you need. But this is where you're going to find all that information. And notice that all of them have 4.5 ones. All of them have 5.5-inch squares. All of them have 4.5 by 5.5. And that's how we're going to get that scrappy look. Because after we cut them, we'll mix and match them. And that's how we get our blocks together. So let's pretend we've prepped our fabric. We followed our cutting directions, and now we have piles of little squares. Here we go. Let's go back to this page where I said it tells you what to place where. Now, not exactly what fabric to place where, but what size square to replace where. Okay, so now we've done all our slicing and dicing, and what we have is 3 piles of 3 different sizes. We have the 4.5-inch blocks, we have the 5.5-inch blocks, and we have the rectangles that measure 4.5 by 5.5. Now, based on her diagram, I know that my 4.5-inch squares are always going to be in the middle. I actually stack these all up, mix them all up, so when I come out, I'm scrappy happy. So I'm going to take these 4 blocks and I'm going to place them in the middle. Then I'm going to take my 5.5-inch squares. Now remember, I've got a stack of these and I've mixed them all up. Purposely mix them up. Don't have to worry about where they go. I'm going to set these in my corners. And that leaves me with the 4.5 by 5.5 rectangles, which are then going to be inserted into the middle sections to make the square. When we're done, this square is going to be larger than we need it to be. Do not trim it down. Not till we tell you to. No. Hang on to it at it's oversized. All right, I don't know why I'm fiddling and diddling, but I am. So, just place them till you're happy. See, I would not be happy with this. That would be me going, no way, Jose. I would probably switch things around. And I'm going to do this kind of, yeah, that looks pretty. I like it. I'm going to do this 12 times. So on my board when I'm done, I've got 12 piles all on top of each other that I know are pleasantly pleasing and nobody's hitting each other. Okay? The good thing about this is these are all symmetrical blocks. So when we go to put them together, you can actually spin them any which way after we've created them, and that ensures that you're not going to have the block next to it have the exact same thing. Plus there's sashings in between, so that helps break it up. What I don't want is red next to red. We want it to look scrappy. So I've used red twice, but I haven't used it right next to each other. And my goal was to use something twice in each block so that I would be sure I was scrappy when I was done. You can do whatever you like, but that's what I did. Now they're all lined up on my board. The next thing I did is took a water-soluble pen. Now, it doesn't have to be water-soluble, but if you use air erasable, it's going to disappear before you're done with this project. If you use friction, when you go to iron your seams open, your markings will disappear. So I would use either a regular pen or pencil. It's going in the corner. These are oversized. It does get cut off later. Or a water-soluble. In the top corner of every block that's in this pile, I'm going to write the number of the block it goes to. In my case, I'm going to put a number 1. So now that I've got these all piled up 12 high, in the top right-hand corner, so I always know where the top right-hand corner of my top left-hand corner of my block is, I'm going to write the number of the block. So in the first one, I write a 1. Next one is a 2, blah, 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 all the way through 12. Now, you probably can keep track of your pieces better than I can. I can't. I needed a system so that as I daisy-chained through my machine, I knew where it went when I was done. So in the second row, over on the left-hand corner, I'd say, 2 dots. That tells me second. This one, 3 dots. Tells me third row. This one, 4 dots. Fourth row. So now I know these are all on the left-hand side. I know what row they belong in. Guess what I'm going to do over on this side? 1, no dots, because I need to do something that tells me it's on the right-hand side. 2, 3, 4. All right. So I've got my marks. I know what block I'm on. I know what's on the left-hand side. I know what's on the right-hand side. As I chain these pieces together right here, I don't know about you, but I forget. They turn around. I don't know what happens. The little mice comes and carries them. I now know, oh, this was the decision I made. First row, second row, third row, fourth row, left side. First row, second row, third row, fourth row, right side. So then I know how to put them down and put them back together again to do the final stitch, the one down the middle. You don't have to do it this way, but I found it kept my brain straight. But, I got to do whatever I can to keep that thing straight. So that's just a tip. Okay, so after I've got these all piled up, I'm going to go to my machine. I'm going to chain piece them with 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to make sure I iron all my seams open. Now, I know that's going to be scary for some of you. It was scary for me at first. But it's not so scary when you realize that every single one of your seams is then going to be covered with an applique piece. So not a single seam shows when you're done. So don't get all, I refused to do them open. I tried to nest them. I had bulky seams. It wasn't a good thing. I should have listened to Lori. She knows more than me. Oh, darn. And all my seams are then pressed open, no bulk, and they look great. So even if they don't line up perfectly, don't fret it. As long as you're close, you're like this one. See, that one doesn't line up perfectly. In a different quilt, I would have to fix that. In this quilt, I do not. There's going to be a beautiful applique going right over that, and nobody's going to see it. These are going to finish up at 18.5 inches by 18.5 inches. Make sure you keep them like that. And you'll notice, I've already put many of mine together, but you'll notice I know that what I decided was the top right corner in each one because I have little marks on. You see? See my marks? They literally are there until I cut them down. That was how I kept everything straight. That should keep you busy for a little while. And next week we'll be back on how to get this ready for, you guessed it, applique. Can't wait.